our energy secretary, Jennifer Granholm, said she divested herself of her stocks in the electric buses, but it was recently reported that she actually exercised over $1 million worth of stock options in that same electric company. So while we're paying more at the pump, the Biden administration is cashing in on our inevitable demand and unfortunately essentially being held hostage by the emerging electric technology that they profit from.
Eric Eggers, investigative reporter and guy who's been looking into this gas price mess for some time now. Eric, thanks very much for joining us. Good to see you.
Hey, great to see you, Doug.
It's difficult for even the most rational, independent observer to try to figure out what the Biden administration energy policy is right now. On the one hand, we see them making these gestures to try to lower prices at the pump. We've all seen recent examples of that. At the same time, it's moving full force forward towards its green energy program. It seems that they're just giving lip service to lowering gasoline prices. Is that your sense? And what are they doing behind the scenes that we need to be aware of?
It's a great question, Doug. You know, one of my favorite phrases is never mistake incompetence for conspiracy. But I think when it comes to the Biden administration energy policy, unfortunately, it's a deadly combination of both. And whether it's pure incompetence or there really is a larger plan to drive Americans off of their reliance on fossil fuels, either way, the American consumer is the loser. You see what the price is today at the pump, and it's impossible to look at what the Biden administration has done and draw any conclusion other than it kind of is by design. I mean, think about, for the first time, they've released our historic energy reserves, and 5 million barrels, it was reported, ended up overseas at a time when Americans haven't had a harder need for oil because of gas prices. No less than our biggest enemy, China, has ended up with our own domestic energy supply. Now, this is happening at the same time that just this past week, the FBI and the British intelligence service announced that they consider China a national security threat. So to sum it all up, no less than our energy is making its way into the hands of our biggest geopolitical threat as acknowledged by our own intelligence services. And that's just one, maybe not even the most troubling aspect of the Biden administration energy policy. That's how bad things are.
You know, if there's any example of how the world, the industrialized world, is not yet ready for a move to green energy, at least at this point in the 21st century, it's what's going on in Europe right now, especially with the war in Ukraine and the war between Russia and Ukraine. Lacking Russian oil and Russian natural gas, the Germans, who've made a full leap towards green energy and are paying the price for that in the worst way, are now building liquid natural gas import plantations. I guess that natural gas will be coming from the United States. Is that their expectation? And is that our loss?
Yeah. Right. It's a great question because, as we've just seen, when we do need to produce more of it, it seems to go into the geopolitical arena. And that's actually maybe a consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, sadly, if there's one leader that seems to get just how reliant the world is on fossil fuels, it's Vladimir Putin. Look how empowered he was to invade Ukraine after he became in charge of the energy supply to Western Europe through Nord Stream 2, right? So obviously, I think that also suggests that he's not a big believer in the effectiveness of green energy, even though that's exactly what we're sold and told to believe in here in the United States. I mean, think about this. Our energy secretary, Jennifer Granholm, said she divested herself of her stocks in the electric buses, but it was recently reported that she actually exercised over $1 million worth of stock options in that same electric company. So while we're paying more at the pump, the Biden administration is cashing in on our inevitable demand and unfortunately, essentially being held hostage by the emerging electric technology that they profit from.
Are there other members of the Biden administration who are profiting from the move to green energy?
Yeah, many of the Biden administration's energy administration and his climate advisory team have long been invested in green technologies and companies that have invested heavily in green technologies. John Kerry is chief among them. And it's really interesting to bring it back to China, Doug. So John Kerry has repeatedly overlooked China's long history of human rights abuses because we're trying to get China to come to the table and negotiate to be a key part of any kind of climate change action plan. Well, John Kerry's big idea and the plan that we were so intrigued to get China to participate in doesn't require China to do anything until the year 2050. So we are letting China do whatever they want from a human rights standpoint. We're sacrificing at the pump and investing in these green energy technologies in the hopes of curbing our carbon footprint. Meanwhile, the world's greatest polluter continues to go unabated. That's our energy policy. That's what happens when the Biden administration is in charge.
Meanwhile, the president continues to blame oil companies for the lack of refining capacity when he's been impeding that. He's also blaming individual gas station owners, not realizing apparently that they make virtually no profit off the sale of gasoline. It's all in the sale of concessions where they make their money. And now the already confused oil companies who have to invest in the long term to make this work are pulling back on those long-term investments. But you make the point that oil companies are even moving into the speculative carbon capture programs. I didn't even know that carbon capture was a viable option at this point because the technology just isn't there.
Carbon capture is not a viable technology. So you're correct about that, Doug. But that hasn't stopped the Biden administration from putting billions of dollars in its recent infrastructure plan to try to incentivize companies to start investing in and exploring that technology. And unfortunately, it's working. And no less than American gas companies are now entering that market because they face such a hostile regime from the Biden administration from a rhetoric and policy standpoint. I mean, think about this. 20 House Democrats introduced legislation that would require the Fed to make investing in oil companies or fossil fuel companies illegal. Like, that's the posture of the Biden administration. And so they're saying, hey, well, if we can't make money doing the thing we were constituted to do, we will go and do the thing you want us to do. And that's invest in this foolhardy fantasy of carbon capture, which essentially means we're going to grab carbon from the atmosphere, somehow turn it into liquid, and then put it in the ground. But the market has gotten so hot because of the Biden administration incentives, it's attracted investment from companies like Google and Facebook and other Silicon Valley's companies which are used to speculative technology. But the Wall Street Journal had a line, the market is so hot for this carbon capture technology, people are paying to capture carbon, which hasn't been done yet, using technology that hasn't been invented yet. That's the kind of
let me interrupt you.
Wonderland dystopia.
The government is paying oil companies to invest in this technology which doesn't exist.
Well, they've created incentives through their infrastructure plan saying, hey, we're going to create these hubs. So if you want to partner here, there's some federal and financial incentives to participate in. But I think more than the financial incentives from the federal government, it's just the fact that the oil companies routinely face such a hostile posture that it creates uncertainty. And one thing oil companies need because of the large lead time in order to invest and recapitulate the oil, that they say, hey, if this is uncertain, we're not going to spend much time here. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's one of the reasons why prices remain so high.
This is a story that will certainly continue. We want to stay on top of it. Eric Eggers, please come back if you would.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Anytime, Doug. Great to see you as always.
You too. Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.